Because of the pressure that would put on Thomas George, he invited the then Planning Minister, Brad Hazzard, to Lismore to come speak to the community about coal seam gas.
87% of Lismore Council residents said they didn't want CSG, and the following week the government approved the CSG production plant in Casino. So there was this huge, like, this community doesn't want it, and then it was like, so what, you're getting it anyway.
We don't want it here. 87% said no.
And so the Hazzard meeting came off the back of all of that. And people were really angry. They were really angry at the government that they weren't being listened to and that they were being treated like fools.
This was done on the pretense of community consultation. Brad Hazzard had been to our region, to Casino, a year before. It was meant to be community consultation, but it was a snow job.
We'd already witnessed that kind of consultation where the experts tell us what's going on.
At that meeting, he controlled the mic and he controlled the meeting.
He'd quite powerfully traumatised many people who attended that meeting. But at the Lismore Town Hall, the power belonged to the people.
The community weren't going to have a bar of it. So somehow 1,000 people turned up to a venue that could really only seat 700, 800 people. This community packed it to the rafters.
Thomas's son, Stuart, worked for McGasco. We were being ignored, and that made people very upset.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the country we're standing on, the Bunjalung Nation. Well, I would have thought you would have showed your respect to the people that originally... Both elders, past and present, and any Well, I always acknowledge it, so if you can't, I can't help that. As your representative, I made every effort to get together the experts.
We got control of the microphone, and it was a great thing, and a great thing for the campaign, because at last we were able to give it to our PhDs, to our original people in the audience, and to say what we thought needed to be said about the whole thing.
And what your actions here today, trying to sell coal seam gas to mine our lands, is sacrilege to us as a people. To our culture and our way of life. You are helping the process of genociding us as a people who are the originals of this land. Yes. Do you know that this is what you are doing? Yes. And we are saying to you, no!
And that made for a very lively meeting.
So, you've come along at the behest of the government, of this minister and this representative. But just to give you a bit of context here, you are in an area, and you've heard from the original people. You are an area where all these other people who live here have made, through a plebiscite, an 87% vote against unconventional gas and CSG. We're talking about future generations and our grandchildren's children. That's why we're here. And this is about stakeholders, not shareholders.
It was an unforgettable display of genuine intelligent democracy in action.
It's one of those moments in your life you'll never forget.
In February 1954, flood, the Northern Rivers was the most catastrophic and devastating floods in Australian history. What would happen with 1,000 coal seam wells, associated piping, compressor stations, tanks, waste ponds overflowing? They will collapse and spread their toxic contents throughout our beautiful region. And you cannot tell me without a shadow of a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt that this won't happen again. Question: what data source leads you all to believe we have any water to spare this industry? We are already on water restrictions. Question: what about the toxic waste? Toxic water sold as today, we don't have any assurances as to what this industry expects to do with this waste. The EPA has stated to me personally, they have no idea.
Besides the truckloads of chemical that's going down, what is going to come up, and is it going to end up in our water?
It's important to remember that water is three-dimensional, and surface water is not necessarily connected to deep groundwater.
It takes one molecule of one of these chemicals to transfer a precancerous cell into a cancer cell. So they work at pretty much undetectable levels. And I feel that leakage of coal seam gas chemicals from wells could pose the largest health hazard we've ever had to deal with in Australia. So I would like to ask the Minister what is being done to stop contamination of our water by coal seam gas chemicals.
I know that hopefully you've now heard that there are a range of experts who've actually worked on this, especially. There are also a range of stakeholders, and the science is such, man, that if it can't be detected. Well, I'm happy to take on board. If you're saying there's, man, if you're saying there are some chemicals that we don't know about, then
The main point I was trying to make is that these chemicals work in undetectable levels. So testing of the water supply is not going to help. We're not going to be able to tell when they're there at levels that can give people cancer. So the only way to stop it...
If you give me your details, I'll give you
Okay, the only way to stop it is to stop the whole process.
How many coal seam gas wells we have in this catchment, and how many groundwater monitoring wells we have in the catchment?
Across New South Wales, there are about 750 coal seam gas wells. Within this area, there's less than 100.
All right. Now, I'm going to take questions from anybody who is actually wanting to ask a serious question.
You didn't answer the last question, that's the problem. You didn't answer it.
Excuse excuse me, just before you answer that, I'm just being told this last answer from Brad didn't answer the question. So before you ask the question, I'll just ask Brad again to clarify that, please.
The question was monitoring wells, and I do need to hand over to...
Short answer is they don't know exactly the number of
You say that the agricultural impact statement is a protection for our area. But what you don't emphasise is that the agricultural impact statement is to be written by the mining company itself.
Our water is already being polluted, our land is being polluted, our air is being polluted. We are going to destroy agriculture if you go ahead with this process.
It's my understanding that with the gateway process, which will allow mining on prime agricultural land, that the decisions will be yes, it can go ahead, or yes, it can go ahead with conditions. But there is no provision for refusal.
That's right.
There is nothing in this plan that protects the land and water from mining. All they have to do is go through a gateway process. And guess what? The gate is always open.
Dear Mr. Hazzard, I live next door to where the coal and gas wells are going in. Can you please promise me that all my animals won't get poisoned?
Aaron, let's see what it's got to say. We are doing everything we can to make sure that everything is safe for you, and I promise you will. Yes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron, I think this is, can I say to you, I mean, Aaron and these little kids here don't deserve this. I think you really deserve this. Really don't deserve this.
Today you will probably also hear another claim by the government which says there has never been any proven incidents of water contamination by this industry. How many times have we heard it? Hundreds.
There's never been an identified subsurface impact as a result of coal seam gas application.
It was only last year that Arrow Energy had to acknowledge that benzene, the cancer-causing benzene, had been found in half of their monitoring wells in Queensland at 6 to 15 times the drinking water standard. That isn't contamination?
How can we comment and make submissions on an application we've never signed?
Why, when that happens at the 11th hour, does the CSG industry get exemptions?
Why are you ignoring completely the principle of precaution? The precautionary principle says that if you're not sure, you don't take the action. And what we're here repeatedly today is we're not sure. So why are you taking the action?
We've asked them questions and they'd squib the answers. They just wouldn't answer the question, or they'd give us a snow job answer where they talked about something else.
How can you credibly pretend to be taking action on climate change when we've got the Arctic melting at a preposterous pace because of our emissions when we should be putting this into renewables?
I'll take that as a statement.
A politician's classic trick is to avoid answering the question.
I want to know who can guarantee our land values. What I know that this will do, who will move to a gas field?
Louise, that's one of the questions. Louise, that's one of the answers that we wanted to discuss today. Because I'm also concerned about making sure that we have the right solution to the problem, to make sure that the value stays in the land. And not only economically, environmentally.
There's been an expert here from the Department of Health.
Part of the process that we did for the last 18 months was to have stakeholders and other specialists sitting around tables for months working on this. And we had Department of Health officials. Obviously we were concerned to make sure all of those issues were looked at. The Health Department officials indicated that they were satisfied with the outcome of this process.
He would answer along the lines of, it's the process. We're involved in the process, at which state the audience would erupt.
There is a process, of course, that is now open, transparent, as a result of the work we've done. And eventually, of course, this has been worked on an utterly, completely objective, scientific, evidence-based process.
Thank you for all the work you've done on it. They are useless once contamination occurs. We can't apply the words on paper retrospectively to fix the problems that this stupid approach to energy generation is going to create. There's enough problems in the world to show us and enough intelligence in this area. We've read the work. I'm sorry, we don't actually need to hear you tell us what the expertise is today. We've done our research.
When our people are exposed to fugitive coal seam gases, they will suffer the same illnesses that blight the lives of the people in touch. These are not hypothetical risks, they're predictable consequences. We understand that your policies do not protect our people or our country, but this community will protect itself.
Well, it turned out that our experts knew more than their experts, and gave them a bit of an education.
A friend said to me later on, you had to have a PhD to put your hand up.
My name is Marianne Lloyd-Smith. I have a PhD in international law and chemical management. I've just returned from Europe, where I attended and presented at the OECD special session on chemicals used and released by this industry. And what was very, very clear from all of the delegates in that room, and so we have 100 countries, chemical regulators from 100 countries, was that they did not have sufficient information to even do the most basic exposure assessment. They could not get the information about what is used. So to hear yourself or the industry or even the Department of Health telling us that it is perfectly safe is totally farcical. You just don't know, and whatever the industry has told you, they have certainly not told you the full constituents of what the chemicals are. We have learned recently at the UN meeting, which I attend, that at least 2 of the POPs chemicals, these are the most toxic, persistent, bioaccumulative chemicals in the world, are being used in hydraulic fluids. So please, don't insult our intelligence unless you can tell us exactly what is in the chemicals, exactly what is being released when the chemicals are used, and what is being released from the ground, from the natural contaminants. Then all other issues of safety are just silly. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
In New South Wales, it's an absolute requirement that all chemicals used in drilling and hydrofracking is disclosed to the government and is made publicly available.
The chemicals have never been assessed. They have no tox data, they have no health data, and you know that for a fact.
We live in a democracy. This is democracy. We elect you as our leaders. If you're not listening to us, this is a joke. While we're even here today, taking time away from our families, away from our jobs, to be here, to listen to you people, tell us about the experts, the codes of practice, the reviews, the science. I'm a scientist. She was a scientist. There's many scientists in this room. This is community. There's 97% people against what you're doing. We've dealt with this with the Great Barrier Reef. Gladstone was one of the best fisheries in Australia before this coal seam gas industry went ahead. Now these fishermen have abrasions on their arms, on their legs, because they can't even go in the water because it's toxic. And you're here telling us you're the experts and this is your research.
Look, the meeting was incredibly passionate and heated.
This was an audience of decent people who were voicing their concerns, but they were not abusive. They asked intelligent questions and waited for intelligent answers, but they didn't get any.
I'm not only sad, I am scared. You have taken away our human rights. Can you promise me I can grow up here safe and I can bring my children back here and they can be safe and healthy and not be influenced by what you have done? This is not your future anymore. This is mine. This is Eden's. This is
Minister Hazzard had been in my office for a meeting, and as we walked out the door, I stopped him and said, "Minister, did you see these? These are road declarations. All these people are saying they don't want coal seam gas." And he looked over his shoulder and he said, "They're going to get it anyway." And I was stunned at that attitude of complete confidence that it was going to happen.